Let's think about cars for a moment, shall we? Cars are a very valuable thing, and something that not everyone not only wants to have, but not everyone can afford in the greatest of ways.
And I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about this.
Meaning, you can't go and buy a very expensive car because we just don't have the money. But other people not only do, they're willing to go and just abandon them. No, really, there are people who have gone and dumped or left cars that were incredibly valuable in places that make no sense. So given that, allow us to show you 8 of the most expensive abandoned cars in the world. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. 8. Porsche Carrera GT. You could argue that this is a rather typical abandoned car story, mainly because it's a story about a Porsche Carrera GT that was abandoned not by an owner who forgot or misplaced the ride, but rather a dealership just letting it stay in one place for 8 years. This happened in China, where new anti-corruption and anti-excessive consumption laws passed by Chinese President Xi Jinping around 2011 made it so that a certain kind of dealership had to be shut down. In this case, it was the only Ferrari dealership in the entire country. And allegedly, when the shutdown happened, not all of its products could be sold or moved, and thus certain supercars are there just lying around. This was proven via a person on Instagram who took pictures of many cars there, including the Porsche Carrera GT. What makes this story even crazier is that there are just 1,270 Carrera GTs were built. This car is 1,255, and only 3 are in this particular red. Thus, it's rather odd that out of all the cars they could have gotten rid of, this was one of the cars left behind. You think that someone would have had time and effort to get this car into a home. What's the price for this abandoned car? Almost $750,000. Probably more due to the rarity of the color. 7. Rolls-Royce Centurion. When it comes to Rolls-Royce, you know you're going to get an expensive and luxury ride with just any model you get. Such is the case with this particular abandoned red, the Rolls-Royce Centurion. It was made custom for a famous celebrity in Las Vegas many years back, but then decided to sell it to a man in Russia. It was put on a boat and shipped over, where it should have been ridden until sold again, or it broke down. But in this case, that's not what happened at all. In fact, it was not just abandoned, it abandoned quite mysteriously off the side of a train track. What's more, it's not a case where you can barely see it. It's quite visible off the side of the tracks, making one wonder not only how it got there, but why no one went to retrieve it or even restore it. Because that model of Rolls-Royce could easily be worth many hundreds of thousands, thus raising the question of why it was abandoned and just left there. Mysteries of life, everyone. 6. Le Mans Blue XJ220. To find a car abandoned somewhere is not entirely surprising, but to find one that is a Jaguar and it abandoned at the edge of the desert, yeah, that's unique. This story states that a Le Mans Blue XJ220 was found on the edge of the Qatari desert, which is not a place to find such a valuable car usually, let alone an abandoned one. The price of this car was $500,000, roughly because there was only 281 made, thus making it a very rare car. Yet as to why this car was abandoned in the Qatari desert, no one knows. The time it was spotted about 6 years before it was found again, and many wondered what happened to its owner. Now, we can speculate that something like car trouble caused the need to abandon it, which Jaguars are famous for because they're hard to maintain. But it's one thing to leave it at the edge of the desert, and another to not come back for it. Perhaps something happened to the owner, and thus that couldn't return. Perhaps there was an issue with the car. We're never likely to know the true answer. 5. Abandoned Lamborghini Marua S. A classic way of finding abandoned cars are barn finds. These are rides that have been shacked up in a barn and left untouched more or less. Finding a true barn find is a big deal as it means it's valuable depending on its condition. In the case of the Lamborghini Marua S, it wasn't a barn it was found in, but an underground parking lot. The car once belonged to Aristotle Onassis in 1969. He was a mogul in the ship industry, and he bought the rare car not for himself, but for a rally car driver that he sponsored, named Stamatis Kokautas, aka Greek Elvis. Onassis went and broke it in with a few thousand miles of driving, then sent it to Lamborghini itself so that the engine could be outfitted and made better. After giving it to them, they put it in the Hilton Hotel in Athens, France, via their underground parking lot. It remained there for 30 years before being found again. It was put up for auction and sold for $483,000. There are a lot of questions that go with a story like this, not the least of which is how a man who made this car as a gift forgot that gift. Parking in the lot was fine, but you're telling us he couldn't remember to go and pick the car up? Especially after he saw his driver again? Wow. 4. Bugatti Veyron. The Bugatti Veyron is widely considered one of the best and fastest cars in the world. It's an established brand that many trust, and many celebrities try and get one during their careers. The one that was abandoned was apparently worth $1.5 million more or less. But in the state it was found, not so much. It was full of rust and other damage and would take some major restoration in order to be fixed. Further leading to questions of how and why someone would go and abandon a ride that was so much and leave it basically to rot. 3. Ferrari F40. If you're able to go and get a Ferrari, you know that'll be a good, fast car and a ride that is full of style. Many people try and go and get these vehicles during their lives, paying top dollar for them as a result. But one person who might be shocked to hear had a car from Ferrari is Saddam Hussein. Yes, the former leader of Iraq bought a Ferrari F40 for his son Uday, which at the time would have cost $500,000. But the interesting story behind this particular Ferrari F40 is that it was abandoned during the Iraqi war. Specifically, it was cast aside after Uday himself was killed in a firefight with US soldiers. The story isn't over though. There's one more thing that needs to be noted. You see, Uday Hussein wanted all of his cars burned so that the US or other forces couldn't get them and make a profit off of them. But obviously, that didn't happen for this Ferrari. Why is that? No one knows. 2. Abandoned Aston Martin DB4. The Aston Martin brand of vehicle has a lot of weight, and most people associate with James Bond. For good reason, but they have had many beautiful rides over the years, such as the Aston Martin DB4, which was once bought by a rich man in Massachusetts in 1970. Yet despite paying $400,000 for the vehicle, he only drove it for about 2 to 3 years. Then, he let it sit outside one of his homes for many years to come. Because it was left in one place and not properly maintained over the years, there is so much dust and rust on the car. Though it should be noted that it did start off right away and had some really cool old school parts under the hood. It's tragic to be sure because scores of people would love to drive an Aston Martin. Plus, he'll likely have made a profit just by selling it. 1. Abandoned Ferrari. If you live in certain parts of the United Arab Emirates, you are likely very rich. But even the rich have to follow rules, including not getting into too much debt, else you go to jail, for real. Enter a man who owned a Ferrari Enzo, a ride that cost $1.1 million. A British man found himself severely overdrawn after making purchases like Enzo, and unable to pay back his debts even after he sold everything. So he took his Ferrari Enzo to the airport, got out of the country, and left the car behind. A sacrifice worth making? Maybe, but we still feel bad for the car. So what do you think? What do you think of this look at the cars that people have abandoned even though they're incredibly valuable? Can you believe that there are rare and incredible cars were just left behind, as if they were junk or something? To be left behind. Would you even think of abandoning cars like these if you were their owner? Or would you treasure them all with all you had? Do you think that there are other rare and valuable abandoned cars out there for people to find? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time on the channel.